Welcome to For Good Measure, an interview series celebrating diverse composers and other creative artists, sponsored by a grant from the California Arts Council. I'm Nanette McGuinness, Artistic Executive Director of Ensemble for these times. In this week's Lunar Module episode, we continue talking to E4TT Luna Composition Lab Call for Scores winner, Palka, who we spoke to in June 2024. Do you want to talk about the piece you're writing for us? Thoughts about that?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm looking at setting text from a paper written by Eunice Newton-Foote. She was a scientist, inventor, and women's rights advocate, and she lived between, I want to say 1819 to 1888, if I remember the dates correctly. Um, uh, and she published this paper in 1856 about her findings of experiments she'd done. And one of the notable results was she was the first person to discover the link between carbon dioxide and temperature, and kind of the principle behind the greenhouse gas effect that is behind global warming. And it's kind of incredible that she discovered this way before like so much of what we think about with climate science. um this was such an early discovery, and at the time, I was looking at this data of what is the carbon um dioxide concentration in the atmosphere at the time that she was making this
Mm-hmm.
uh doing this paper and everything. And during her lifetime it was somewhere between 281 and 294 parts per million.
Mm-hmm.
The 400 and some concentration now. And just thinking about if more people paid attention to her paper at the time, um what kind of path might we be on today?
It's true.
Perhaps. you
Yeah.
know um and I guess it also was her observations were very profound to me, because there's still the issue of some people not really believing in climate science, as if
Yeah.
it's something that there's not enough proof of, or there's a lot of doubt around or something like that, when it's this science has been around for a while. It's not
Yeah.
particularly a new kind of thing. um
Yeah. Yeah. The second half of the 19th century was a very fertile scientific era. A lot of stuff was being discovered or refined in very early ways. Were other people working in this field, or was she pretty much a lone voice?
there were some other people working in the field. I know that John Tyndall is most often credited for her discovery with
That was one of
greenhouse
my
gas.
questions. Yeah.
But his discovery was made several years later.
Mm.
There's seems to be disagreement from what I've read on whether he was copying her work or whether it was an independent discovery.
Hmm.
Because I think he was in Ireland or something, I want to say. But depending on who you read about it, some people are he definitely was copying her work, and some people are no, it's there wouldn't have been good communication in the time across the ocean. And I'm I don't know. But regardless of whether he did or didn't copy her work, he's often credited for her discovery today, which is not the way it should be.
No, I agree.
um,
That is often typical, that kind of zeitgeist. Evolution
mm,
and Darwin had this similar thing happen. There were other similar discoveries around the same time, but it
yeah,
is fairly typical that if a woman discovers it first, it's the guy who comes out with it later whose name we remember.
yeah, yeah. Reminds me of Rosalind Franklin with DNA discoveries.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And yeah, and also the women who did the mathematics for the space travel and so forth.
Mhm.
Yeah. Unusual that she was able to get the kind of scientific training that,
Yeah.
as a woman at that time. Do you know anything more about her background, how she managed to do that?
Um, I know that she went to I want to say it's the Troy seminary or something.
Okay.
that I think had some degree of like science, or it was
Mm-hmm.
the Troy Female Seminary and the Rensselaer, like,
Rensselaer.
yeah, I'm like, I don't know how to pronounce that uh school. It's not quite clear to me like what things she might have learned where and what things were just like her independently like self-taught kinds of
Mm-hmm.
um stuff. I was kind of hoping to maybe reach out to some of those places or even see if I could visit since I'm in upstate New York,
Right.
since they have any records on her that are like in person that I could look at that's like more than what I could find online. Um yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'd certainly be interested in that for the
Yeah.
commission as well.
Yeah.
That would be
The
cool.
interesting thing I did find out was that like one of her daughters became a naturalist,
Mm.
and wrote a book on like marine life.
Mm-hmm.
And it is interesting to me because Rachel Carson mentions having like encountered this her daughter's book on marine life. And so it's just
Mm.
kind of interesting to me, this kind of like chain of influence
Mm-hmm.
in
Mm-hmm.
science there. And it makes me wonder what it was like for her daughter to grow up with, her mother doing all this science and this kind of way it might have inspired her. And then her daughter's writings reached Rachel Carson. And that's just kind of like incredible to me.
Right. The 6 degrees of separation
Hmm.
theory of how people are connected, except this is only 3, I guess, degrees. But
Yeah.
yeah. Did she teach as well?
I'm not aware of her teaching,
She's
but
just so
I
such an
could be
interesting
wrong.
person.
Yeah. It's been frustrating trying to look up more about her because a lot of the sources are these like short 1 paragraph biographies.
Right.
And it's like, okay, I would like more information.
This definitely sounds like a time for some archival research, and you are
Yes.
well placed to do it. That's smart. Um,
Yes.
it
Yes.
might
I think
lead.
I'll have maybe a little better luck now that I'm here in person over the summer rather than trying to research from Los Angeles.
Yeah. So for the piece, tell us
Mhm.
what's the instrumentation you're going to be working with.
I'm going to be working with voice and cello and piano.
That's
Yes.
that's great. And the text that you're working with, are you going to excerpt? Are you going to go in? Do you know yet how you're going to work with it?
I'm planning to use like excerpts from her paper where she made the discovery
Mm-hmm.
and figure out like maybe not necessarily in the order exactly that they were in the paper, because I want to figure out what's the best way to make the like main takeaways of the paper make sense, even if there's a lot fewer words uh,
Right.
that are being used. Because I don't want to like flatten her experiments, but I also wanted to make it like understandable and like clear enough without having the audience having read like the whole paper, you know,
Right. Right.
clear enough,
You
but
want to
not
create a
too,
narrative thread.
yeah,
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 no, I think that's very wise if you just kind of go chung 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 in order. And besides, when one sings, it's a very different experience in time for the audience as opposed to
mhm,
reading, that one absorbs the words differently and some words take time differently. So yeah,
yeah.
it's like going from a book to a movie. You can't cover the same amount of verbal territory.
Yeah, yeah. No, I found that in the past that often I have like cut in half or cut and only used a quarter of like the words I originally planned on in some pieces because I was like felt like the words were rushing the music, and it's like that
Mhm.
doesn't work. Okay, I got to pare down the words further and further, figure
Yeah.
out what works best musically.
Yeah, so I'm glad you're thinking about that. And it does lead to kind of an interesting side note about how time in music works as opposed to
Mhm.
time in daily life. It's different, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Our perception shifts because of how the music is flowing or something.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to For Good Measure, and a special thank you to our guest, Caleb Palka, for joining us today.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast by clicking on the subscribe button and support us by sharing it with your friends, posting about it on social media, and leaving us a rating and a review. To learn more about E4TT, our concert season online and in the Bay Area, or to make a tax-deductible donation, please visit us at e4tt.org. This podcast is made possible in part by a grant from the California Arts Council and generous donors like you. For Good Measure is produced by Nanette McGuinness and Ensemble for These Times and designed by Brennan Stokes, with special thanks to co-producer and audio engineer Stephanie M. Neumann. Remember to keep supporting equity in the arts and tune in next week for Good Measure.